Okay, welcome to the UltraGauche podcast, first episode. That means we're gonna need to explain what the fuck we're doing with this. So, the idea with this podcast is that me and my brother will every 2 weeks read a text, usually something modern, kind of like I want to kind of keep it relevant. Stuff usually written by like left accelerationists, ultra leftists, and communization people. Though, I like we're not going to read anything by like a Hillary bot, but like we do have a fair amount of room in the space that we do have. So let's see. Uh, with without getting too much bogged down, um, we're reading the Xenofeminist Manifesto this week, and I'm gonna let my brother introduce himself, then I'll introduce myself, and then we can sort of begin our conversation.
Hello, all. I think most of the followers from this podcast will be coming from my brother's Twitter, who has become more popular than me, and this is a great source of jealousy and argument, and we hate each other now. So, my bad. I'm Asher. You could just call me Asher. You'll find me at Napsy743 on
Yeah,
Twitter. I don't know if it's okay to
yeah,
shill
yeah,
Twitters.
definitely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm the basic kind of person. I don't really. Uh,
Mark so curious.
Mark so curious is what my brother calls me, um, and I'm not gonna be the politically literate one. Uh, I mean me and my brother do have conversations about politics. It's just not really the my focus, nor is it like what I consume 100% of the time. Although it's certainly I have rants. Me and my brother rant a lot. Is what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say.
yeah. That bit about consume is gonna get us in trouble with some of the people listening to this, I'm sure. But
Yeah,
you know what we mean. Like a lot of times we're just gonna use terms and they're gonna be kind of like used in a general sense. So you'll have to forgive us for that.
yeah. And
Um,
if I might say, I'm looking at the audio right now. We might clip sometimes. I'm not really sure how to control this. But
yeah,
anyway, you can get back on.
this is our first episode, so you'll have to
There
give
will be
us.
some audio. Oh, there will be some audio issues. So we're gonna have to speak in an intonation that's kind of lower than we're used to. We're used to yelling at each other, so
Yeah, the like if we like really it's gonna be really if
this is
this
going to be more pleasant to listen to
yeah.
than if we were talking at our normal
Yeah.
volumes.
If you listen to this and the audio is terrible and horrible, just remember how we feel. We're like kind of the real victims here.
Yeah, exactly. The gain
So
is as low as it can get,
uh,
and I can't put it any lower. And we are both like 3 feet away from the mic. We're trying. Is what we're. We're trying.
yeah, let's okay. So I'm Avi. You can find me at Avakian, Avakian underscore Spontex, Spontex on Twitter, and at Joyce DeVivre 75 on Reddit and I guess Discord. I'm not joining your Discord server.
And I'm glad you spelled that out for them because I was going to have you do that anyway.
Yeah, yeah. It's a okay. So I'm going to explain that joke so I don't ever have to do it for any of you on Curious Cat or whatever. Uh, uh, so there was a current of Maoism in France in the 60s called Mao Spontex, and they kind of tried to fuse Maoism, like kind of like the aesthetics of Maoism almost with the spontaneity, the spontaneity of like a thinker like Rosa Luxemburg or like the councilists and situationists. It didn't really work out, and I think Lauren Goldner says that they were actually a bunch of ultra Stalinists, and you can find this weird picture of like Jean Paul Sartre selling their paper, but in any case, I simply replaced the Mao in that, the Mao Spontex, with the most famous and important of American Maoists, Big Bob Avakian. Have you heard of our Lord and Savior, Big... No, and
Big Bobby Avakian.
Yeah, Big Bob Avakian. And I assure you I'm not a Maoist. It was just a really great idea I had, and I had to change my Twitter @ to that. It was something else before, and I don't remember. Don't tell them, because it was linked to my personal name. And
Wasn't it Joycean Communist?
No, that was my screen name.
Oh, okay.
My screen name on Twitter is misery/yerky form right now. It's supposed...
It used to be misery value form, right?
Yeah, misery/value form. But
slash value form.
But I have...
forward? Yeah, /.
Yeah. I've switched it up in keeping with the holidays and also a joke about typos in the GC. So,
Twitter holiday things are weird.
I get very angry at the people who've skipped Thanksgiving to go straight into Christmas. I hate that.
They're the same as supermarkets, which have like this early in the year already blasting Christmas music.
Yeah, I like there's no good Thanksgiving music or Thanksgiving like anything. Like, and I understand like that sort of like there's some like shit about like colonialism and shit. Like I'm not pretending, but you know, call it Turkey Day and talk about like the experiences of indigenous people, but like could we please like not skip it for Christmas? That's all I'm at. Like,
yeah. Like I'm thinking of changing it to pumpkin spice Asher.
Yeah,
just to celebrate. It doesn't even have to be like a Thanksgiving thing. Just seasons.
Yeah,
are nice.
like at least admit that it's like the fall.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So
and by the way, this is the old. Sorry for getting off track, but this is the only like. Fall is the only time of year I care about, and like all my favorite holidays are in that.
No, winter's great because it's the only time they cancel school and work.
Well, yeah, but like with me, at least as like a seasonal thing, I just like fall the most.
Yeah, we should actually talk about what we came here to talk about, which is xenofeminism.
No, let's not be constrained. What's No, we really do though.
No, but okay, so the text we're talking about is like on the internet. If you talk about it's the Xenofeminist Manifesto. The actual title is Xenofeminism: A Politics for Alienation by Laboria Cuboniks Collective.
Okay, thank you for saying collective because I was so confused.
Yeah,
you said it was a site, so I'm like, oh, is it a site run by a person named First of all, awesome fucking name, Laboria Cuboniks.
Definitely naming one of my kids like Laboria Cuboniks, our last name, but so I'll explain the context and explain why I chose this for the opening episode of a podcast that isn't really left accelerationist in any way, but which finds it interesting. So, this apparently came out of a, like, one of those...
We printed this out, by the way, so if you hear paper, that's why.
Yeah, if you're hearing paper, that's definitely what that is. So in any case, yeah, it came out of, like, some academic get-together or other, where, like, 50-something, like, scholars attached to, like, feminism, cyberculture, women's studies, queer studies, all that sort of stuff. They kind of came together and produced this thing, and I think they're like that was I think the draft, and then I think there's like a 6-person collective that actually wrote this out, and that's who Laboria Cuboniks is. It sort of came out of the accelerationist moment, which, as far as I can tell, has sort of died away, except for, like, the UAC people who hate me, I think, a little bit, and I've alienated all of them on Twitter, so we'll probably never read anything by them.
Okay, what you're doing... Sorry to... Behind the scenes right now, what Ovs is doing right now is great. He's not talking directly into the mic, and I need to start doing that, too. Because we can generally talk louder that way. Anyway, get back to what you were saying, Obs. Sorry.
Yeah, so, let's see. So yeah, it came out of the accelerationist moment, and that's mostly dead. I mean, there's still, I guess, like Ray Brassier and some of those guys walking around. Speaking of which, we definitely have to read some Ray Brassier at some point, but not like Nihil Unbound, but like something he's written. Like, I'm thinking definitely Wandering Abstraction after we've read Kamat. The reason I chose this is because I think it's an interesting attempt to come to terms with sort of the current situation. I mean, this was before, like, I guess the Bernie boom and all that. So a lot of what it's reacting to is like the sort of
kind of Hillary Clinton liberalism.
No, it's like it's definitely situated on the left, but it's like talking about like leftist like localism and like there's identity. I hate the term. I really hate the term. But
they use the term.
Yeah. So, which I kind of want to discuss that later, but. It's definitely something to come to terms with the current situation. So I'm gonna ask you, Ashi, like, what do you think of it? Any ideas, like general stuff or whatever?
I like the ideas. I'm not a big fan of the way it's written, and I know that's a kind of point of disagreement between us.
Like some of it I found actually really annoying and overly like
it's very melodramatic. Like the prose is just chock full of very I don't know how to describe it, but very just upfront and like punchy language. But like it's academic punchy language, so it's very hard to like.
There are some parts that sound objectively stupid.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
There are a few sentences that
like,
just upon reflection sound really stupid.
I underlined one thing and wrote something like it sounds too much like Badiou, like, and it got me actually kind of. We might end up talking.
Badiou?
Don't even start, Asher. You don't take 6 years of like French class and forget most of it just to like not be able to say that. Like,
okay, so Badiou.
Yes.
Let's see. I had a pencil. I couldn't find it for most of the time I read it, and I read it this morning. But there was on the first page. By the way, there's a PDF for this. You just look up Xenofeminism. Xenofeminist
I'll put
Manifesto.
it on the Twitter.
Yeah, put it on the Twitter. We're probably gonna upload this to SoundCloud. And
we're gonna try and upload this to lots of things, but it might be difficult for these first few.
And we'll get in that, like, as final thoughts roll by. I'm going to explain things. But definitely SoundCloud, and it'll be in the description there. On the first page of the Xenofeminist Manifesto PDF, on the first paragraph, this is basically the entire catalyst of writing this, from what I can see, is no more reification of the given masked as critique. So, basically, stating the obvious is no longer a form of political revolution. It should just be recognized as stating the obvious.
Well, that's one of those things where you kind of get the where the more academic stuff kind of helps, because what they're kind of talking about with that, and you are right to hit upon that as being a central idea, is like they're sort of opposed to any sort of like what would you say? Normative naturalism. Like, you can't say, like, they don't want people to start sticking to stick within like rigidified categories or whatever. So they're sort of trying, like, this is part of the thing, is they're trying to rethink all of that. So like the stuff they talk about before that is no more futureless repetition on the treadmill of capital, which is a rather wonderful phrase. I like it, at least. And that's sort of what they're talking about with the given, is this sort of like no future type thing that Mark Fisher was talking about before he died. And we're definitely reading some Mark Fisher, so don't worry. So yeah, some other stuff you're thinking about?
There's stuff on I didn't have notes, and I promise you I would have more to say if I did. And I just got back from a 6-hour shift, so please take pity on me. Um, but their stuff on gender was pretty interesting. Let's see. They mention grassroots on the ninth page of uh, uh, without foolhardy endangerment of lives, can we stitch together the embryonic promises held before us by pharmaceutical 3D printing, reactionware,
Yeah.
grassroots telemedical abortion clinics, gender hacktivist and DIY HRT forums, and so on, to assemble a platform for free and open source medicine.
What's the number next to that paragraph? Or
O times 16.
O times 16. Yeah, if
And
you
it's
read
the
this,
last sentence.
yeah. Listeners, if you read this, you'll understand what the fuck we're talking about, because
Yeah.
otherwise we sound like idiots.
I do love the subheadings. 0. You know,
Yeah, they're very...
trap.
Yeah, so...
Oh, that clipped. I'm sorry.
That sort of paragraph is something I kind of want to talk about, because they're sort of talking about taking current, like, biotechnologies and whatnot, and, like, turning them to, like, kind of like making them liberatory and emancipatory. And it's actually the only place that I could find where they give an actually serious like proposal that isn't just them just saying, oh, we need to do X, Y, or Z.
I'm so very happy you pointed that out, because when I was reading this, I'm like, okay, this is all fine and good, and I like what you're saying here, but what are you asking us to do?
Yeah,
it's like they seem, a lot of it seems to take issue, and you know, these are good issues to have with, like, the way that protest movements tend to move within like capital boundaries. But, like, I'm not a big fan of how there's so little proposal being done.
Yeah, which I don't even think...
And I like that word. Thank you for using it.
I don't think like, I can understand, like, that there's a problem right now where there is a question of, like, what is to be, you know, Lenin's old, you know, chestnut, like, what is to be done, and that's a fair thing. But if their whole point with this is that we need to rethink what is to be done, then maybe, like, a few more, because, like, if you read, like, for example, the Communist Manifesto, like, they do give a 10-point I mean, most of it's been done by, you know, the bourgeoisie in the time since, but, like, those are serious. They're actually telling, you know, they're actually delivering a series of demands.
Yeah, I was actually scared to point out, like, in the Communist Manifesto, there are solutions. I mean, again, not many of them.
Well, a lot of the manifesto, like, where a lot of it, like, when they're talking about what do we need to do right now, has to do with the context of 1848.
Yeah, and this, but, like, I like, with the Communist Manifesto, one of the few things I do respect is that while, like, it does state a problem, it also it concerns itself with that solution. And
yeah, with this is like,
whereas with, like, you know, this doesn't really do that as much.
Yeah, so, like, what I wrote down in the corner was, like, their only serious proposal is this idea of open source medicine, where you have you know, you would, like, 3D print you know, hormones, so that, like, you know, like, trans or queer people can, like gender hack or whatever, so that they can do it.
Gender hack is a good work.
Yeah,
right.
and they can talk, and they can do it themselves without without having to go to, like, the medical companies or involving themselves in the process of capital, which is a bit of a problem anyway, because you would need to do this, you would need a 3D printer, and, like, I don't know.
What are you gonna do? Steal one from the college?
Yeah, like, most...
Or a high school. We have one in the high school.
Yeah, like, and, I mean, that technology is not as advanced as we all want to pretend it is, so it's like, the people, like, the sort of world that they're describing is always, like, one step... Like, a lot of what they talk about seems like it would be really cool, but it's not going to be possible without a revolution, without, like, an actual... massive change to the social fabric.
Yeah, and, like, what, you know, and they do kind of address this in like, their, and maybe I might be reading too much into it, but they seem to be very concerned in large scale protest instead of you mentioned that you keep mentioning this and I keep ignoring it. Um, the impetus of many left leaning protests to localize, and a lot of I think this manifesto kind of concerns itself with the necessity of a large scale loud movement.
Yeah, and this is sort of they use the word Promethean in a few
Yeah.
places here that I like, and it helps us get into a discussion about what might be called the broader strain within the left right now, and it is actually now bigger now than like it's currently bigger than it was when they were writing this manifesto, where the idea is, oh, we have to start thinking in universalist terms because the idea is to like say universalist technological terms, excuse me, because the older because their idea is like the way we've been doing it for most of our time here has been like what I guess we again I hate the term but I'm going to use it is identity politics or whatever because it's like oh let's localize or let's think about like small scale struggles and you get fetishization of say like the Kurdish experience right now or the or what's been going on in Chiapas for the last 30 odd years. And what you notice about both of those struggles, besides the fact that the amount of change they've wrought seems overwrought, is that they also haven't expanded, and they've also only existed in very small scale type stuff. So even if you want to posit them as revolutionary, they're very limited. And I mean, like what are you going to build off of that?
Yeah. Well, one of the to kind of change the subject. Sorry for that, but
That's fine.
I do like their discussion of how most abolitionist movements are kind of focused on keeping those page 6 Avokai for parody, just the first paragraph.
Yes.
And sorry. And sorry. How a lot of abolitionist movements are kind of used by the people who would be benefited by a certain interpretation of the word abolition. If I might read this, ultimately, every emancipatory abolitionism must incline towards the horizon of class abolitionism, since it is in capitalism where we encounter oppression in its transparent, denaturalized form. You're not exploited or oppressed because you are a wage laborer or poor. You are a laborer or poor because you are exploited. That's kind of disconnected from my point, but I like the sentence.
Yeah, were you thinking of in the second paragraph
Yeah,
where they refer
yeah.
to like turfist
My bad. Yeah, my
interpretation?
bad.
Yeah, so
I saw because when you were talking, I remembered. Oh, this sentence is here, but I didn't look at the rest of the paragraph.
yeah, so we'll talk about your point about what you were interested in, which was like turf it like the turf version of quote unquote gender.
Actually, I have a better sentence right here. Absent such a universal, the abolition of class will remain a bourgeois fantasy. The abolition of race will remain a tacit white supremacism, and the abolition of gender will remain a thinly veiled misogyny, even, especially, when prosecuted by avowed feminists themselves.
Yeah, so like there's this idea that you need to have a wider notion like I wrote that it was like kind of this Hegelian thing about like you have to have a concrete universality as opposed to like the abstract universality that says, "Oh, we're all just human. Why are you saying Black Lives Matter? We're just human. Why are you demanding, better wages or why are you uh talking about sexual assault? We're all just human." And that's not something you could functionally run a movement off of.
What's with it? What's with all these labels? Aren't we all just like
Yeah.
human, man?
And, yeah, like the point is to abolish, is to abolish race, gender, and class, and
Because you're sick of hearing about it is like the...
No, I'm talking about what I sort of see as
Oh,
being,
my
which
bad.
is we want to abolish all of that stuff, but like you can't talk about that within the context of like capitalism that requires like you can't abolish those within the context of capitalism. Like you can do this sort of paper over thing where you like cast more black folks and women and whatnot in movies, or even something like universal healthcare is nice, but like that isn't going to end class. So like we can't paper over the. I mean, class is the one that's really hard to paper over. Like you can kind of paper over race and gender by just not talking about it or not making it clear in a kind of cultural sense, but like with class it's sort of difficult except within the context of like nationality and saying, oh, we're all America is already great, so does that sort of silliness. um but yeah, so like it can't be, we can't have a notion of a movement that just wants to stop talking about all that stuff and like, oh, like we have to change things, like, but could we not discuss them, please? Like that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Let's see. And
Sorry, we're recording this in a room that can get kind of uncomfortable.
yeah, it's a it's a padded cell. We're
Yeah.
in jail.
Yeah.
But what I sort of like is they talk about in the paragraph before how like our notions of like what is gendered or what is raced always sticks to people like who are feminine or black or what have you.
Yeah, and for people who have read Americana by something Adichie or something.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow. Really woke of you.
Very, very, very offensive of me to forget half of the author's name, but 3/4 of the author's name.
Ulysses by something Joyce.
There were like 4 names on the author thing, and I
Yeah.
forgot like 3 of them, so I feel really bad for...
Adici's good. Just
Adici's
don't
good.
get them confused with Achebe.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be hard. I mean,
Yeah.
but for anybody who's read Adichie Americana by Adichie, in that book, there's a great discussion of how you're not really, you don't have a race in countries where you're not a minority. The second you become black is when you move to a white country. And that's kind of I feel like that kind of...
Well, yeah. What's interesting is the way that's usually dealt with is as a process where most people talk about this as just being a process of identification, where it's like, oh, you become black because you meet other black people and start to think of yourself as black, as opposed to the fact that the way you sort of, from what I can see, you become black or you become feminine or whatever, is that a certain space is defined for you within capitalism.
Yeah.
And then like even if you say to yourself, oh, I'm not within that space, like the broader structure isn't going to change as a response to that. So and so that's what they're kind of talking about, is it can't be just this identity based struggle where you just say, oh, I am X, Y, or Z, because it's like even like they'll even accept that to some point, but they won't change the structure. So they'll say, of course all black people are equal, or of course you're equal as a working class person, or of course Marx talks about this in the Gotha Critique, where like there's already equality in bourgeois society. It's just a purely legal, formalistic type equality. And I mean, he doesn't really buy into like that there being other types of equality, because it's kind of difficult, because there are different people. It's like you can't like his note, like if you're talking about like communism, like from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. So there are people of different abilities and different needs. So there's not really any sort of like equality, because I don't think like the only way you can have that is in a legal formalistic framework. So like the main thing is to just create human beings who, by pursuing their own good, are also pursuing the reproduction and of the society as a whole, and how they're not, that sort of thing. But yeah, so like they're what they're talking about here seems sort of in line with that to me. Like I wrote that in the corner where it's like this sort of, and yeah, a lot of Marx and Hegel sort of came to mind here. Probably just because that's what I've been reading, but you know, what?
More Hegel than.
Yeah, I've been like a lot of like online, a lot of stuff online. Let's see, like I've been doing like I think right now what I've been doing is a lot of Hegelian Marxism, so I'll read something by like Werner Bonefield, which is a great last name, and then I'll read something. Then I'll read a little bit of Hegel, and then I'll go and read like the Gothic Critique or the 18th Brumaire or something, and that's sort of the way I've been doing it, and it's been working for me. So yeah.
Let's see. You have questions you wanna ask me?
Yes.
I sorry, I kind of zoned out on that last rant because a lot of jargon I'm not really prone to.
That's fair.
That's fair. You said in the most dejected tone I've ever listened to.
No,
it's like oh that's fair.
There's gonna be growing pains. Now is the time of monsters and whatnot. So let's see. Okay, so here's a question I had written in the corner, and I wanted to ask you.
Page.
Oh, it doesn't fully relate to what. Like, it's stuff we've already talked about, but it's a question I need to ask you personally. And it's open for the listeners, too, if they want to send us some sort of feedback through whatever channel. You should probably direct it towards me, unless it's a question specifically about something Ashy said, because for the most part, I really don't want to see his, like, Curious Cat or whatever fucking exploded by, like...
And also keep in mind that, goes for both of us, this is an unscripted podcast. Do not judge us.
Yeah, please be charitable. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you because like we talked about, like they talk about how struggle is overly localized right now and stuff like that, and like a lot of their complaints is that there's a leftist like fetishization of this, and that I think can be fair, but I think the problem is. For me is I wonder if there's anything you, Asher, specifically see any sort of struggle. It doesn't even necessarily need to be quote unquote leftist or communist or whatever, like just a global struggle, like some form of like, struggle right now that conceives itself outside of local boundaries. Like that's what's sort of like, I don't see that, and they're talking about it, and it just seems to me that they're proposing it, but they can't seem to find it anywhere in the world. Like,
I mean, I take somewhat of an issue with them taking an issue with the fetishization of leftist focus on localization, because basically a lot of issues are inherently kind of local,
well,
and so
yeah.
and some issues are specifically directed at communities that are generally small and tightly knit that can be fixed with just a little bit of protest. I don't really understand your question, but if I were to try to find I don't really see a problem with trying to solve local issues. I don't think that's something to kind of begrudge people for fetishizing, because if you can fix a problem in your local community, do it. If I don't really have an example, I'm not really involved in that kind of thing, but I respect people who kind of focus vehemently on their local elections instead of just participating them out of some sense of civic duty, which is where I'm in. I don't have any sense of civic duty. I just do it.
What, yeah. So for me,
Sorry, got
sorry.
off topic. I'm sorry.
That's fine. The let's see. The thing that sort of worries me about it is the last sort of halfway international thing I've seen at least was something like Occupy, which, you know, or I guess the broader movement of squares, right? And that's where, like, I saw that happening around the world, and even that you could say, like, even with that, like, it was always bound, like, necessarily to localities, like occupations and
Yeah.
whatnot are necessarily of a place.
Yeah, like there was an Occupy Harrisburg. There was an Occupy.
I'm really sad I never went to that. I really would love to see what Occupy Harrisburg
You
looks
were
like.
in 8th grade.
Yes, I know, but
Yeah,
I
like,
was sort of interested. Even at the time, I really liked.
yeah, but you were
Occupy.
on like a liberal slant at the point.
Yeah, I was definitely a liberal, but even so, there were
Like,
liberals who liked Occupy, and that's probably part of the
well,
problem. But
yeah, like that was exactly the problem. In 7th and 8th grade, both me and my brother went through a very liberal kind of, not like very Democrat kind of phase.
yeah, like if I'd kept with that, I'd probably either be alt-right or Hillary bot by now. Like, to be honest with you,
I don't think you would be alt-right, but
I
definitely a
I can
Hillary
see
bot.
places where I would have gone off the train at the alt-right station.
I can certainly do that too. I remember when I was a freshman in high school, the I did have some pretty like alt-right beliefs.
Yeah.
It wasn't till halfway through freshman year that I started believing that the wage gap was a thing. So I was kind of on like a very bad thing.
Well, yeah, like I think you should be fair and always see where
Yeah.
you could have stepped off at the wrong train stop or whatever. But for me, like the thing,
Oh, and we used to watch atheist YouTubers.
yeah,
I mean, the Messianic Manic isn't like an alt-right atheist YouTuber, but he's an atheist YouTuber, and you definitely get some kind of political leanings because of that kind of content.
yeah. Well, yeah, like, but yeah, to kind of get back to the point,
Sorry.
the thing for me is that, like, I think, like, you know, we kind of have to talk about struggles sort of as they are. Like, we can't, you know, we're you know, like, it's, and I'll probably get crucified for using this quote, but it's like Marx said, that communism is the real movement of, you know, it's the real movement. It's like, the real movement to abolish the current state of affairs. And so the question is that a movement that dips in and out, or is it a movement that's always imminent to the proletariat? Is it something that we can always notice, that we can always find somewhere? And for me, I tend to take the second view, because otherwise I think we're sort of condemned to a situation where we're always sort of like searching out. We're always sort of hoping that it's going to reappear, because we say, oh well, at this time in history it appeared, and at this time it disappeared. And I think we sort of have to find it in current struggles. Like, we sort of have to see it in where it is currently. So that's been my concern, is that if you say that local struggles are no good, then like where are you finding where are you finding something more global? Because otherwise you're just saying, oh, we need it, but like how, like, you can't even begin to build it if there isn't anything. Like you could say, oh, I want to build a global struggle by linking local struggles, which has been kind of the view of a lot of people for a while now, and I can see why that gets into some silly shit, like Negri's, like, what do you call it, the multitude, where you just take every struggle of every oppressed group or whatever, and you just link them together, and it's like, well, like some struggles are pretty clearly liberal. Like if you look at like, you know, if you look at like D-Ray, like he's definitely a liberal. Like you can't say, oh, D-Ray's faction of like Black Lives Matter is going to be revolutionary communist, but there are things you can find in Black Lives Matter that are definitely leaning that way, and that's what you should be looking at, like the sort of ground level rioting and whatnot. Though I do understand that riots are sort of a contentious topic on that whole thing. But yeah, like for me, I'm just wondering where the like I'll ask this in the very esoteric mystic sort of way I like to do, which is where is xenofeminism to be found? Like, is there anything you see in this world that, like any struggles you see right now that might be taken up by a group of enterprising xenofeminists as being something they like, or that something they represented that represents some of their ideas?
Yeah, like that's a good point. A problem I kind of had with a kind of problem I had with this thing is that there's not really this manifesto is that there's not really a clear idea of like there's not a clear idea of like what xenofeminists I lost the point. I'm sorry.
Well, they even say at the end that it's not a program, and that's fine. I like the communization people. I can understand why you would be against programmatism or whatever.
Their phrase, I think, was it's a platform to build off of.
Some of that shit they talk about is absolutely stupid. Like they say the word like insurgent memeplex, which made me literally want to vomit. Like I was getting so angry at that, and that's sort of
memeplex. Is that like just a word I don't know, and it's like memeplex or something?
No, insurgent memeplex. I think the idea is like, oh, you would have like something like what the what 4chan is, like 4chan for xenofem, where you create these memes and and this is a very stupid Gramscian sort of notion, but you create the culture that moves the culture, right? Like this whole discussion about the what's that thing called where it's like the space of acceptable discussion, moving the
moving the goalposts.
No, not the goalpost. The there's a special name for it. It's like the someone, one of our listeners will have to remind me, but yeah, so it's like that's an insurgent memeplex is basically xenofeminist 4chan. Like, they might say, like, that's where I find a lot of the stuff they talk about. Like, a lot of the stuff they talk about is just stuff 4chan is doing much better than anyone on the left or whatever. So and if I don't think anyone in 4chan is going to use the 3D printers to print hormones, but they can definitely use it to print guns. Like, they're much better prepared, and they have a better idea of what they're doing than, like, that's where I find at least the xeno, if not the feminism. Like,
I think we're gonna be swarmed with pictures of fat people who use 4chan and that one I've trained many years with the sword.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. There's a great version of that with Bordiga where it's like, while you were having sex, I was reading Marx. While you were and now the barbarians are at the gate, and I fucking love that shit. Like,
so like I feel like we're gonna be swarmed with your comments on this just because it's like, 4chan is better prepared for and that we're just gonna be swarmed with it.
No, but what I mean is like if you have this kind of, I think, incoherent Gramscian idea of trying to build an anti-hegemonic counter institution, like Verso calls themselves, like literally Verso, like it's a leftist publishing house, and they're like, we're counter hegemonic, and it's like, shut up, you're just another business on the market. Like,
I'm just kind of sinking into my body right now because I kind of like the idea, like, I've seen, like, video essays discussing shows I enjoy, describing them as counter-hegemonic to like
Oh,
traditional forms of Oz knows what I'm talking about, but
yes.
I'm gonna keep vague on
I'm
this.
totally sorry to that person if they listen to this and get angry. I don't think they would necessarily.
I don't think they would either, but like,
be bothered. But for me, that's just a very silly sort of.
you're coming at it from more of a theory instead of an analysis kind of point of view.
Well, that's going to sound weird to certain listeners, but
For let me rephrase. You're taking issue with Gramscian ideals, and not so much like Gramscian analysis of media, if that makes sense.
no, I take issue with just Gramscianism as because if you look at where that went like I can understand if you do it as an academic paper, but that's who Gramscianism is for academics. Like it's early, it has no actual like, and it's why I think it's actually in the Xenofeminist Manifesto is because it was written by academics. Like, and I don't think xenofeminism, like if we even as a like a platform or whatever they're talking about, is really has any room to grow. Like I think what you're gonna see, what you probably saw in 2015 when this was written, were about 12 graduate students all did their dissertations on xenofeminism, and then it fucking disappeared as a discussion point.
Because
Like,
you don't see it nowadays.
yeah, and because like the only people who are talking about it, I think right now are us. Like
Yeah.
and that's just because I happen to find left accelerationism interesting, if
Yeah.
wrong, and it's a lot of it's sort of like
A lot of it's a lot of the ideas concerning like not implication, application.
yeah, yeah, well, and a lot of a lot of times it always like, and you see it here where they're trying to take where the like I think if you're going to start by talking about, you know, revolution or massive change or whatever you want to call it, like you do have to kind of start with Marx, and you have to sort of accept that there's only one group that can really make that sort of change, and it's like the proletariat. Like you can't like even in the accelerationist manifesto where they're trying to kind of work through this stuff, like the proletariat comes off as more of just their chosen voting bloc. Like they could try and do women, or they could try and do like, you know, some other large voting bloc, but instead they've just randomly decided on the proletariat. It's like, you know, it doesn't seem like there's any essential tie to like this class that has the ability, like the only class that has the
There's
ability.
no real sense of impetus, just like what's the word? Chance, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's like even,
It's like they rolled the dice and it landed on proletariat.
yeah, like it. I think they just choose the proletariat because it's large, which is not, which from what I understand isn't the reason Marx chose it. Like if Marx wanted to choose a really large bloc, he could have done women. Like that's 51% of the population.
Yeah.
But the reason he chooses the proletariat is because it's, first of all, the class that's at the point of production. Like it's the one that can grab hold of, you know, the levers of society and fucking stop them. You know, it's also the only class that like that by its own movement does like necessarily wants its own self-abolition. Like if we take women, like you get something like the women's lib movement in the 70s, which a lot of it was radical, but what it produced in the end, it produced a lot of a lot of careers for a few people, and then it sort of, and even today, like the whole thing about Ghostbusters, four women are now Ghostbusters, which I guess is good, but like that's what a successful women's movement looks like, is it's four new lady Ghostbusters, and it's as opposed to what would a successful proletarian movement look like, and it would look like its own abolition. Like, because I mean, if you look at something like even if you talk about like the old workers movement, like you know, that while it was a proletarian movement, I mean, it's a kind of not really been successful. I mean, one capitalist restructuring in the 70s fucking wrecked it, and two, I'm like I don't think you could really say it was properly communist because it wasn't talking about abolishing itself. It wasn't talking about abolishing the proletariat, and obviously, if you're going to abolish the proletariat, you have to abolish the bourgeoisie and property and the value form and all of that. So
and
it's
misery
and misery in the value form, and well, there'll probably still be sad people under communism, but they won't be like fucking horribly alienated people.
Sad commie boys is what you're trying to say. To kind of get away from that point, there's been a lot of negativity on this podcast, and I can sense it emanating from Oz right now as he's staring me down. There's I want to know what do you like about this, because you had you had me read it, and there are certain phrases that I like, and I've read a few of them, and I find it interesting, but I want to hear some positivity from our lefty boy, I guess we'll call it.
So the one thing I really liked from it, and what kept me reading it, despite it being half like serious political discussion and half academic jargon and kind of bullshit, but yeah, what kind of made me sort of like it was this first paragraph where they talk about, technological mediation as being an essential fact of the world. And it's something I've been kind of think about, like even with communism, is like there's this sort of notion that we're going to have like an unalienated species being, and it's going to be completely free of mediation, and it's like I don't see how we're ever going to do that. Like, I think we can get rid of specifically capitalists and class societal mediations, but I don't think we can ever get rid of like language or whatever.
Yeah.
Like and the same thing with like technology is that on the technology question, I can definitely go like EndNotes is rather infamous for Jasper Byrne's essay in EndNotes 3, which we might read at some point if it isn't too much of a pain in the ass, where he talks about delinking and like sort of wrecking up the whole machinery of capitalist circulation, and that got them a sort of reputation for being anti-technology. I mean, I would say that they're more techno-skeptical than they are like techno-phobic or whatever.
Yeah.
But
if I might pause you for a moment. Sorry, listeners.
Yep. So yeah, like there's like on the question of technology, I can see the accelerationists say, like, you have the accelerationists on one side saying, oh, we need to use technology in order to produce communism or to create large societal change. I mean, it depends on the accelerationist and the day you ask them, because some of them are just straight up social democrats. And then you have EndNotes and certain communization groups on the other side talking about, well, you can't really know what technology is going to be useful until you're in a moment of struggle. So like we shouldn't be placing all our bets on like, oh, cell phones are going to free us or whatever, which is where some accelerationists go. Like they even in here they clearly believe that certain technologies escape the matrix of capitalism.
Yeah, like what kind of annoyed me when reading this was that there's not really there's like a good deal of trying to explain, oh, this technology is cool and can help radical,
Well, yeah, they say, oh, like not all technology is progressive, but it sounds more like just so that they don't get criticized on that point more than something they're actually like. And they talk about elsewhere, like, how technology is situated within capitalism, but then they don't go the extra step and ask, oh, like, what if some technologies are essentially integrate? Like, what if there's like Kamat might say, like, what if there's a telos technologies that is just anti-communist or essentially preventative. Like personally, I mean, if you want to have Twitter if you think Twitter is going to exist after the revolution, I think you're going to need to have a heavily modified notion of it or whatever. Or even, like, how do you think Twitter is going to be useful for even doing, like, large societal change? And I'm like, probably not. Like, there's stuff I think that's definitely going to have to be used, which is, like, a lot of technological innovations in agriculture are really cool, and I love that shit. But, like, I don't see how, like, most technology that exists today is ever going to have a communist halos. Like, that's... Yeah.
Okay. I've kind of exhausted all my thoughts on this.
Well, I want to give... Like, you did ask for the...
Yeah, positives. And I was about to mention you haven't really answered that concretely yet.
Yeah, okay, so I answered it partly. I gave you one reason I liked it, which is this concern with alienation and mediation as being, kind of essential and whatnot, which I think is nice. But I think EndNotes, again, does it better. In EndNotes 3, there's an article that I'm always suggesting to people, and I certainly suggest it to the listeners, even the ones who hate me for talking about communization stuff, which is Spontaneity, Mediation, and Rupture, where they rethink a lot of older sort of categories that have been important within Marxism and whatnot. So let me see what else I can find here. Oh, this one on page 2, the paragraph is 0 times 0 4. Xenofeminism is a rationalism. To claim that reason or rationality is, by nature, a patriarchal enterprise is to concede defeat. And
I do like the their first like section 0 is very focused on on given and like accepting accepting defeat and how that's not an option. It's a very angry manifesto.
Well, yeah, but sometimes I do think they go the complete opposite. Like, for me, I tend towards like the pessimistic side of things. Yeah. Like, I don't get like, even
they do harp on they don't use the word misery, but we're gonna use it.
They say melancholy.
There we are. They use the word melancholy. They harp on that a lot, but you know what? Sometimes it's the only option.
I mean, the way they use it is to say, oh, that there's no hope left, which is totally like I don't think you can take that. I mean, I've pissed a few people off on Twitter who seem to take that position, but and that's kind of where you have the UAC people. That's where they seem to have gotten, where it's like, we're not ever going to escape capitalism, so either we do like a Kamat and we leave it, or we do like, or we just ride that fucker into the grave. Like,
that's not really useful.
Yeah, you can't have that. But at the same time, like they don't ever seem to, like, these folks seem to go the kind of opposite way, which they call illusion, and they critique, but they don't. It's not critiqued. Like, it's critiqued, but then it's never, accepted, and it's not really taken into their whole project right here as being...
I'm feeling a lot of negativity. I obviously, like, I don't think we both... Like, there are certainly interesting ideas in here, but I don't think any of us would, like, either of us would consider ourselves xenofeminists.
Yeah, well, some of the... Like, a lot of the technological stuff, I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, this sounds fucking great, but that's not going to happen, like, right now, or if it does, it's going to be done in a way that's totally mediated by capital, and it's I'm like, one thing I'm really excited about right now is artificial wombs. Like, I like that for me, that's like, oh, like, I can have like 12 kids by myself. That's gonna wreck up the nuclear family or whatever, and that's really exciting and shit. But like, the way that's going to be used under like capitalism, I know it's going to just be fucking terrible. Yeah. And there are going to be entire workers in warehouses that just make babies, and they have to care for the baby.
Yeah, and their positivity about technology shows itself early in the paper. Page 2, the second paragraph on page 2. The real emancipatory potential of technology remains unrealized, and I'm going to let my cat in.
Yeah,
Her name is Lila. She's a black cat. We will have pictures.
Yes.
We'll post them on his Twitter.
I might put them on the account for this podcast. Speaking of which, if you do want to follow this podcast on Twitter for updates or whatever, we are at UltraGauche Pod. I don't think there are any spaces there, so you
want to spell that for the listeners?
Yeah. So, at UltraGauchepod.
Fascinating stuff.
This has been a fucking.
This has been the best
exciting.
Part.
Yeah, this
has
great.
been the best part of the podcast.
So like, what do I like? I like their insistence, at least in some way, on like rationalism and universalism, because it reminds me of the French philosopher Michel Ledoux, and that's her whole thing. Is she's like she critiques Irigaray like notion that there's like something essentially patriarchal, masculine, or whatever about rationality or reason or logic or anything, and that I think is super valuable within the context usually of academic debates. Like I don't think there are any women outside of academia who actually hold with the notion that logic is essentially masculine, and if they do, it's usually on the basis of some sexist notions or whatever that they themselves have been taught. Like, I don't think, like, if anyone spends any amount of time thinking about that they're going to say, oh, well, logic, that's a man's world. Like, no one actually believes, like, systematic thinking, that's fucking nerd shit. Like, I'm gonna go and work in the kitchen or whatever. Like, no one's going to actually...
Well, I don't know, the kitchen is very soothing and...
we're talking in the context of women, so I don't want anyone to get the notion that we're like.
I'm just fucking around. Like that's my goal here.
Yeah, let me see.
Oh god.
Yeah, our cat is like right by the microphone, and there's not a whole lot we could do about that. So
yeah, she's a good girl, but like, oh my god.
We're sort of
that. By the way, that cough just clipped the mic. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh dear God, cat.
There is something sort of let's see. There is something sort of interesting to me that they kind of like they start with like they kind of start with feminism as sort of their base. Like they don't start with like Marxism like I would, or they don't start with like critical race theory or Afro-pessimism or whatever, like someone like, I guess, Ta-Nehisi Coates would. Like, they're specific.
Sorry, our cat is just going to wreck this audio, and it's going to be... You get to deal with that, listener. We don't have to.
They're specifically starting with feminism, and it's why I'm sort of iffy about their critique of, like, quote-unquote idpol or whatever, where, like, the moment that produces, at least modern feminism, like, there is certainly, like, the earlier work during the beginning of the 20th century, and some of those folks are kind of ahead of where we are. Like, I think Emma Goldman is in many respects ahead of our time, but like they start with the sort of with the sort of like women's movement feminism or women's liberation feminism, and that sort of seems to have gone in two directions, where you have like actual struggle, where you have like workplace struggles that are sort of specific to basically femme people in general. Like you have Sophie Lewis talks about this, and speaking of which, if you would want to donate money to this podcast, instead I would suggest giving some money to Sophie Lewis, You can find her as like Safu on Twitter, and she's current. She was asking that anyone who could to spend money, and her writing is super valuable and cool, and we'll probably read something she's written. She did a really great essay on The Handmaid's Tale that I want to send to my one friend to piss him off, but it's wonderful. I really like a lot of her writing, so I would say, send her some money if you can,
and send our cat Lila all the money. Just
yeah. But
I'm sorry, Lila.
Yeah, in any case, Sophie Lewis was talking about this on another podcast, which I'm not going to name, but, well, no, they gave me a shout out. So, the Infantile Disorder podcast, they did an episode with Sophie Lewis where she talks about struggles around, like, reproduction right now, where you have women in, like, I guess, the third world or global south or whatever the proper term is, who are surrogates for people in, the West or in America or the first world or whatever. Surrogate, like the people who hold children, right? And the way they sort of protest issues going on in their life is to threaten to miscarry or threaten to, like, take a fall down the stairs or something, and in that way to kill the child that some American couple has spent like $1 million or something to have. And that's so
that's an interesting form of protest.
Yeah, well, that's one way you could see the women's movement as having gone. But then you also have that sort of way the other way it's gone, which is this sort of academic / careerist move that happened. And I think this happens in the absence of actual struggle, like at any sort of real level. Like, I think, like, the only way you get like academic type, the way academia works is that ideas that come out of specific cycles of struggle separate themselves off from that struggle and develop on their own, and they develop into monsters, which are these they develop into these sort of things that have no bearing on anyone's life. And you can see this with Marxism too. Like, what does Marxist literary theory really have to do with, me and my boss and my fellow workers? Like, it doesn't really have a whole lot to do. And you sort of, that isn't to completely knock, academic thinking or whatever, but I do get kind of annoyed when you have a lot of stuff that comes out of just academia, and it's just ideas that have I like to say that, like, they're phantom theory. Like, they've completely phantom theory and zombie action.
Phantom Theory coming to theaters this September.
Yeah, which is good because Halloween just happened. But yeah, like, I was gonna write something on this call it like Phantom Theory and zombie action, where like theory, like, and Kamat talks about this, and that's where I sort of get this idea. Is he talks about it in his essay Bordiga and the Passion for Communism or something like that. Which we're probably going to read that at some point.
We've kind of escaped xenofeminism. Do you want to, like, finish up your thoughts on that?
I'll finish up my thoughts on that. You can explain what the issue is with the podcast and where we can put it.
Yeah.
And then we'll do our thing on the on Happy 100. So yeah. So in any case, yeah, like, my issue is that xenofeminism's critique of identity politics seems a little bit confused to me, because identity politics, if you want to talk about it, is what happened when when the ideas produced by the struggles in the 60s moved into academia and became displaced from actual struggles. So that's where you get, like, a lot of the stuff that comes together to produce what people complain about when they complain about identity politics. But that's also the context of xenofeminism. That's also, like, this wasn't, like a bunch of like it wasn't a bunch of women workers in tech who came together to write something talking about issues specific to them or like that, and then moving from that to a more general point about women and workers under capitalism or whatever. It's a specific, and you can tell it in the language. It's a specifically academic sort of movement, and I'm not going to deny that anyone in academia isn't like a worker, but like they also like they have you like a lot of times the way academic labor works is very separate from like the way
our cat is playing with the cord to the microphone.
is rather separate from the way that you know, stuff works if you're if you're like me and you load boxes into a truck for a living,
or if you're like me and you push carts around for a living.
Yeah, and for me, I once joked that my world is basically, because I do go to school for philosophy, and my school and my life is in the morning I read Plato, and at night I load boxes, and those are, and you could say oh, you apply ideas from reading Plato to loading boxes, and that's not really the way I feel like you should
do that.
Well, no, like
you should apply ideas from Plato while you're pushing boxes.
Even if we were reading Marx in an academic sense, like a lot of what's going to be produced from that.
What uses Marx's theory to you when you're pushing boxes?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Oh,
what I'm saying is that within it, if we're within an academic context where the whole point is just simply reading Marx and simply talking about Marx's ideas, but there's never any, like, Marx sort of becomes filled out by the struggles that produce him. Like, you can't really, like, Marx is, a product of, the struggles in 1848, the English Chartist movement, and then he continues to develop with, the First International and the Paris Commune, and all of the struggles in his own time. So you can't, like, when we talked about Marx in a sociology class, it was literally Gramsci. Like, it wasn't even really Marx. It's like, oh, like, we have to talk about ideas and how can we use ideas to fight the ruling class, and it never fucking comes down to, and it never
pans out.
Well, no, like, it never becomes filled. Like, it's this purely formal thing and never has any content.
Yeah.
And that's this, like, you can't, like, and I'm gonna get crucified, but you can't just read Marx. Like, there's gotta be, like, if the proletarian movement somehow died, Marx would die. Like, that's, I don't see, like, I don't even think we're gonna read Marx under communism. There wouldn't really be a point. Like, so yeah, that's my sort of issue with their take on, identity politics, is that they want to critique it as something that's not bound up in the exact same place that they're coming out of. And that's my sort of feeling.
Yeah.
So to close out, like, y'all should definitely read this.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, but
it's
also
definitely, like, essential reading, but, like, don't,
like, try and think, like, take some of what it talks about and think through it yourself, and that's what you should do when
read
you're
it, but
reading
think
anything.
critically.
Yeah, that's what you should do when you read anything. But like, so I'm gonna let Ashley explain what the deal is with this podcast, and then we have an anniversary coming up, so we're gonna talk to you about that.
Yeah, we've been married for 20 years.
God, no. Fuck no.
But we have barely stood each other's company for 18. But
I swear, if we'd been in the womb together, I would have tried to have murdered you in the fucking womb.
You did have three. There were three of you.
No, there were two of
you.
me.
You did murder a brother of mine, so
I definitely murdered my twin in the womb.
But anyways, to finish my thoughts on Xenofeminist Manifesto, it's very essential, and everybody should read it. I cannot stand the prose.
Yeah, there's a lot of jargon. Sorry, there's a lot of jargon stuff in there that you're just that if you're not academic, if you're not coming at it from some sort of academic thing, which is probably for the best. I would say read it. Ask yourself, what if there's something in this? What does this have to say to my situation? Especially if you're like, if you're femme or queer or whatever. Like, ask yourself, oh, what can this actually do for me? And if it can't do anything for you, then it's a nice idea, but throw it out. Like,
Yeah.
And read Marx instead, because Marx can always do shit for you.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all my thoughts on it. I'm not a big fan of the prose. It's definitely written like a manifesto. So anyway, here's the issue with the podcast. Well, the two things that we can definitely upload the podcast to are SoundCloud and YouTube, because that's an upload by upload basis. What I would like to upload these to is iTunes and Google Play Music, because that's
and Player FM.
And Player FM, because that's how podcasts grow. And I think that while Avakai's 400 Twitter followers is a nice following to have, it's not gonna...
No, like, only 10 of them are gonna listen this far. Like,
yeah,
they'll start it and say, this is bullshit.
Yeah, like, it's not like that... While it's a nice audience to have, I would like to grow, and me and Ovs will be doing another podcast. Like, each of these podcasts will come out one episode every 2 weeks.
Yes. So like we'll do UltraGauche,
which is
this pod.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like UltraGauche is basically Ovs's podcast, where he has me read political texts he wants me to read, and we might do movies if they're political relevant and political.
Like, we might do an Adam Curtis movie at some point.
So that's his podcast, and then my podcast is where I have him basically watch a movie or listen to an album or maybe read a short story or something like that, and we discuss it.
Think one is politics and one is culture. Like, that's the gist.
Yeah. Don't have a name for the culture one yet, but
actually, if you guys can think of something, you might want to send us.
Okay. Here's my one rule. It has to have the two words culture corner in there, but like we considered counterculture corner, but counterculture corner, but like Ovs obviously took issue with that, and so if you have name suggestions, name suggestions before UltraGauche was my brother and Marx. That was vetoed by Avakai. Ovs, sorry. And
they're not going to be able to guess the spelling, so I'm not way too worried about it.
Yeah.
they're going to get caught up on that in 30 different ways. I'm not even... I mean, don't call me that, but I don't care that much.
Yeah, I'm sorry for slipping up. I will self-flagellate.
you have to do a one-person struggle session and write me a 15-page apology for it, like that one trans person on Twitter was forced to do.
Oh dear God!
By like her group of Maoist comrades or whatever. It was horrifying, but. It's like the most left Twitter thing in the world. I'm sorry, it is.
I hate left Twitter. Anyway, so let's see. Okay, wow, we got off the topic of in order to upload this podcast and the podcast I'm gonna be hosting basically, in order to do that, I need to have an RSS feed. I might be able to learn how to do that. I don't think I have that capability.
If any of you guys can help us with that, that would be great.
Like, if there is an option to make a SoundCloud account an RSS feed and just have, like, that count, like, every time I upload to SoundCloud, it'll notify iTunes and Google Play Music as well as Player FM. Although hopefully Player FM can be an upload by upload basis. But like, if I can somehow link a SoundCloud account and use that as an RSS feed, then that would be way more helpful, because then it could just automatically update iTunes and Google Play, which again is how podcasts grow.
I mean, that's not how Chapo grew, but whatever.
Well, Chapo grew because of Patreon and general...
No, they just got lucky as shit.
Yeah, they got lucky as hell. And word of mouth is obviously like a great way.
Yeah, do share this with your friends.
If you like it.
Share,
please
send this to your enemies.
Send it to your worst enemies.
Send it to people you want to ruin. Like,
send it to our cat Lila, who has already heard half of it.
Make all the guys on 4chan listen.
Okay, so the audio cut out for some reason. Sorry about that.
It fucking hates us as much as you do.
So, anyways, if there's anybody who can help me with an RSS feed, please, oh god, DM me at Napsy743.
He's doing the audio. I don't know shit about this, so you have to...
So, here's the thing. I have not asked Dobbs about this yet, but I might give you, if you live in America, a Amazon gift card of $20, a damn fine $20, and I guess that's for two podcasts, two different podcasts. So it's a pain in the ass, $10 for each podcast. Hopefully, it doesn't take long.
Just explain it, or help us or whatever. Like, I don't think I don't.
Or do it for us. That is also
no. I don't want like someone doing like labor for us. Like, that just sounds weird to me. Like, if
and we will profit off of their labor.
Yeah, we don't have a Patreon for this, so we're not going to ask you for money.
Oh yeah, obviously. We started a Marxist podcast entirely for the for the goal to get like free labor.
We did it with the intention of becoming bourgeoisie.
We want to become the class that rules all. The class that death forgot.
Is that a reference, or did you just?
Where did I get that? It is a reference. Monster Factory. That's where it's from.
Oh,
but sorry.
Wow, that's can you imagine the audience for this and how schizophrenic they'd have to be to actually enjoy this? Okay, is that everything? Okay, thing cut out again. It's starting to get really shitty, but I just wanted to wish everyone a happy 100th to the October Revolution. It's been a good 100 years, I guess. I mean, a lot of shit just fell apart, and that's kind of a bummer, but, let's be happy for once.
Yeah.
And that's going to be it for this podcast. We're so sorry.
Yep, this is the last episode.
Feel free to, take this out back and murder it. I don't care.
Last episode ever. We're Goodbye, everybody. We'll be back 2 weeks from now, right?
We'll probably be reading Mark Fisher's Exiting the Vampire Castle.
Yeah. I'm dead right now, just letting you know.
We're all dead.
Yeah, we're all dead inside.
Including the podcast. Goodbye.
See ya. Oh, God, it's clipping.